Hey everyone, thank you for joining us this week for our multi-cloud live stream. Just a reminder, if you are joining us, that these are taking place every week on Tuesdays and Thursdays with new speakers and topics. This month, we are focusing on security. So today we have with us Kendra, who is joining David and me for a session on vulnerability management. So Kendra, if you don't mind just introducing yourself.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Kendra Kendall. I'm on the technical marketing team for the Carbon Black Security SBU at VMware. It's great to meet you all. I'm looking forward to presenting around the topic of security, and I hope you find it enjoyable.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We're happy to have you. And just a reminder for everyone too, before we get into it, that if you have any questions, please feel free to add those into the chat from wherever you're watching, and we'll be sure to address those during the call. Otherwise, we'll get into it. So Kendra, we'll let you go ahead and kick us off.
Perfect. Let me share out my screen then. I have a few short slides here. I'm not much for slides, so we'll go quite fast through these. But our topic today is securing vSphere workloads with risk prioritized vulnerability management. So we'll be covering the Carbon Black Cloud. Specifically, we'll be looking at our cloud workload protection solution that does vulnerability management and inventory management for your workloads that are hosted on vSphere. This is a really cool and unique and powerful solution that enables you to see vulnerabilities affecting your vSphere workloads in a prioritized manner. And it's built in to vSphere vCenter as well. Some of the security challenges that we tend to see is that there's too many tools. I used to work in the sysadmin help desk space, and I had umpteenth bookmarks of different consoles I needed to go to, and it just got overwhelming at times. We see a problem with too little context. You can't really secure what you don't understand. And then, of course, we have too many silos. There's always been this inherent, I would say, conflict between security and infrastructure teams of, security saying, hey, we need to fix these things. Infrastructure saying, what is it that we need to focus on, and not having that shared information between the two. So in terms of us addressing these, we really do that with this cloud workload protection solution. We're having our security solutions built in instead of bolted on. So they're just built into what you're using today. They're more context centric. So we're giving you that information about what you're securing as well. Again, you can't secure what you don't understand. We're giving you that information about what you're securing. And we're also making this unified, and we'll see that when we dive into the demo. We're having shared context between your security team and your infrastructure team that mitigates and reduces that inherent conflict between the two. But as I mentioned, I'm not much for slides, so I am going to switch straight into the demo from here. As Lauren mentioned, feel free to jump in the comments if you do have any questions. We're happy to address them as we go along. But let me share out my screen so we can get into the demo. So let me swap over. Okay, perfect. Just to give you a high-level description of what the solution is. Again, it's called Cloud Workload Protection. It's an offering from VMware Carbon Black that provides vulnerability assessment and inventory management for workloads that are hosted on vSphere. So I really like to think of it as a native mechanism to secure your vSphere workloads without incurring the performance tax of something like a periodic scan. In terms of the architecture or components to cloud workload protection, you'll have a vCenter plugin, which is what we're looking at right now. And you'll also have access to the same capabilities, same visibility within the Carbon Black Cloud console. So you have that shared truth for the infrastructure team who might be living more in vSphere vCenter, as well as your security team who might be living more in the Carbon Black Cloud. So again, same context, same capabilities, same visibility throughout both of those components. I want to start with the vCenter plugin right here. we'd stand up an on-prem appliance that would facilitate the communication between the Carbon Black Cloud backend and your vSphere environment. Both that appliance as well as the vCenter plugin, they're bundled in a single OVA, so it's a really easy, smooth installation there. Also, one really powerful, unique component of the solution is deployment. So our Carbon Black Cloud agent is actually included as part of VMware tools. So enabling this across your environment is basically as simple as clicking all or some of the workloads you'd like to enable Carbon Black on, clicking enable, and you're good to go. It's super smooth because it's facilitated by VMware tools. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing right now. So we're currently looking at the vCenter plugin, this Carbon Black one over here. This is our summary page. It just shows a high-level overview of things like the appliance health, inventory status. So is Carbon Black enabled? Is there an update available? Do you have assets eligible for Carbon Black, etc.? We also show some high-level graphs of assets affected by critical vulnerabilities and what OS those are on, so Windows versus Linux, as well as where those critical product vulnerabilities lie. So are they Windows OS-based? Are they Windows app-based, etc.? To actually get into the meat of the solution a bit more, I want to swap over to this vulnerabilities page right here. This is where you'll be able to see the vulnerabilities affecting your environment, what those are, what assets they're affecting, and so forth. Up top, you can see the total assets I'm monitoring, the total number of vulnerabilities, as well as breakdowns based on how critical those vulnerabilities are. And these also act as filters, so if I only want to look at those most important or critical vulnerabilities, I can do so. The point with this is to not only show you the vulnerabilities affecting your vSphere environment, but give you a prioritized, realistic method to deal with risk and threat. We know for a lot of people, security isn't always your only job. We wear a lot of different hats in IT. So you have that ability to drill down and address what's truly most important, instead of just looking at this list of total vulnerabilities here. And you can see I have almost 32,000 in my environment. You're able to see and drill down to what you truly need to address first. So in this critical one here, I have only 53 vulnerabilities versus this giant list of 32,000.
And quick question for you there, Kendra. Yes. How is the platform identifying the different levels of severity and risk and vulnerability?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we have a partnership with Kenna Security. They do an amazing job of doing some of this prioritization. So we partner with them. Let me actually show you one of these vulnerabilities here so we can dig into it a bit deeper. So this severity or risk scoring is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being most severe, most risky. So we take into account your standard CVSS scoring, and we combine it with some metrics from Kenna. So Kenna has a variable dynamic scoring system. They take into account outside variables like how easy is it to actually exploit this particular vulnerability? Is this vulnerability being leveraged in an active attack campaign? Those things are going to make it more risky, more severe, critical to deal with. So we combine those variables with the CVSS scoring to generate our risk score. So a good example of this would be something like the recent Print Nightmare vulnerability that came out. Initially, that probably would have had a lower scoring. But when it's being used in those giant active attack campaigns, that's going to make it much more critical to deal with. So we raise that risk scoring.
Got it. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great question. So just while we're here as well, we're looking at a particular vulnerability here. We can see the severity of it, that risk score that we just talked about, what OS it's affecting, OS version, the CVE it ties back to, as well as links to the KB it's fixed by. We also give you plain text here what this particular vulnerability is. And we link to the National Vulnerability Database if you want to read a bit more into what that particular vulnerability is, how can you resolve it, and so forth. So we have this nice workflow that you typically use to deal with managing your vulnerabilities. built into to this vCenter plugin, which makes it really nice for people who are typically living in vSphere vCenter. You can also
quick question. CVE stands for what? I mean, I know this is out of the. Is this the Computer Institute? I mean, cybersecurity. I can't remember which one CVE relates to.
Oh, that's a good question. Off the top of my head, I can't even remember what that.
Okay, that's fine. I know it's coming from the list of.
Yeah, I know. There's so many acronyms floating around. I know CVS is Common Vulnerability Scoring.
Vulnerability, yeah. Okay, sorry.
Common vulnerabilities and exposures?
That might be it. There's always a way where you can puzzle them out where you're like, oh, okay, support there. But yes, so we're giving this information on those particular vulnerabilities. You can also click in and see the affected assets. So what assets are affected by that particular vulnerability. You can click into that workload from here as well. On the monitor tab, you'll get this new section here for the carbon black vulnerabilities, where you're able to see all the vulnerabilities affecting that particular workload. In terms of how we're assessing the environment, we are scanless. Once you enable, we'll do the initial assessment of the environment within 24 hours of enabling, and then automatically we'll reassess the environment every day from there on out automatically. You can trigger a manual reassessment on a per workload basis as well. A typical workflow I'll see for this is that maybe you've resolved one of those more critical vulnerabilities and you want to confirm that that has actually been resolved. You could come in here, trigger that manual reassessment to confirm that that vulnerability has been taken care of.
By the way, I looked it up. See, it was Lauren was spot on. Common vulnerabilities and exposures.
Perfect. Last page I want to visit within the vCenter plugin here is inventory. As I mentioned earlier, super easy deployment process because it is facilitated by VMware tools. So all you really need to do is basically go in here, click enable, and you're good to go. Again, that initial assessment will begin within 24 hours. You can see here those that you have not enabled, and I'm going to filter down here to those that are eligible. So again, super simple. Click all or some of the workloads you'd like to enable, click enable, you're good to go. Super simple process because it's facilitated by VMware tools. In terms of the technical requirements here, you're going to need vSphere 6.5 or higher, vCenter 6.7 or higher, and VMware Tools 11.2 or higher for this to be supported. Awesome. Well, I'm going to pivot over to our Carbon Black Cloud console from here. As I mentioned earlier, we have that shared context, shared capabilities, shared visibility between the Carbon Black Cloud and the vCenter plugin. So if you're more on the security side of things, you may want to live in the Carbon Black Cloud. If you're more on the infrastructure side of things, you may want to live more in that vCenter plugin. Up to you, but again, shared capabilities between both. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, we just got a quick question in from the audience, if you don't mind. They are asking, does it require a VM reboot?
It does not require a reboot for the installation. So what's included in VMware Tools is the agent installer. So when you click enable, it will trigger that installation, but the installation of the Carbon Black agent does not require a reboot.
Got it. Thank you. Is there any follow-up questions to that? Feel free to add them in, but we'll let you continue then.
Okay, perfect. No worries. So let me show you what the vulnerabilities look like within the Carbon Black Cloud here. This will look very similar to what we just saw before. We can see all the vulnerabilities up top, all the virtual machines we're monitoring, and then breakdowns based on how critical those vulnerabilities are that act as filters. So again, same truth, same visibility between the two. This is super nice because if you do have someone more on the security side, they can be logged in here and see, oh, they have actually resolved that critical vulnerability. And you have that shared truth between the two. So the infrastructure team can say, hey, I know these are actually critical to deal with. And then once they've resolved them, the security folks on their end can see that those have actually been taken care of. So it reduces some of that conflict there and kind of removes those inherent silos between the two teams. Oh, sorry. Did you? Was another?
Yes, you're just catching me on the asking the questions. Is there any, workflows available for alerts or notifications that they can be sent to specific teams to address?
Great question. So we can send some of this vulnerability information to something like a SIM. We have an open API. As far as alerting goes, we don't currently have out-of-the-box alerting set up, but that is something that you can do with something like a SIM solution. We do have an open API if you do want to port some of those things over. I have seen people do some interesting things with the API, like send over new information to Slack or the like. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with it.
Got it.
Now, one question I want to address here is how we're actually gathering some of the stateful information and correlating it to the vulnerabilities. We're actually using another part of our solution suite at Carbon Black called Audit Mediation, and it lives under this live query tab over here. Audit Mediation essentially turns all of your endpoints into a relational database that you can pull information out of. It leverages the open source project OS Query. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, it just basically turns all of your endpoints into this giant relational database that you can pull information out of. You can see all the tables here related to device info, everything from Chrome extensions, hardware information, software information, file information. So a whole bunch of information you can pull from your endpoints that's been traditionally quite hard or sometimes even impossible to gather. So we're leveraging this to gather that stateful information and correlate it to the vulnerabilities. Now, one of the nice things about cloud workload protection is that we don't separate these two. We give you access to this audit mediation solution as well. So you can use it outside of the vulnerability assessment, the cloud workload protection solution. Out of the box, you'll have around 95 pre-built queries that you can run as you wish. Just to show you some cool ones in here. We have some pre-built queries for things around scheduled tasks. Oftentimes in attacks, scheduled tasks are used as a method of persistence. So we have this pre-built one for scheduled task created, scheduled task modified, or just pulling all of the scheduled task information as a whole. You can run these one-off, or you can schedule them out. So if you want to run this automatically, say daily, weekly, monthly, etc., you can do that. Beyond the pre-built queries, you can also build out your own, just leveraging standard SQL syntax and any of that OS query schema we were looking at before. People will build out all sorts of different queries. I just worked with someone who was building one out to pull specific Chrome version information from all of their endpoints. You can then view the query results in the console here. And you can also export these into a CSV format. So if you want to pull them somewhere else, I've seen people make some pretty cool charts with things like Power BI. You do have that capability too. We also have our query exchange. We have a super active user community at Carbon Black. So other IT admins leveraging this tool will post queries that they've created. So you can leverage this for some of those out of the box day one values as well. But as far as my presentation goes, that was about everything I was going to show. Do we have any other questions I can answer, address from the audience?
I had a question, and we may have talked about this before, but so this plug into vCenter, and you're looking at workloads running on vSphere.
Mm-hmm.
With some of the new things we're doing around VMware Cloud on AWS and those sorts of things, is this available for that? Does this still support organizations that are sort of doing the hybrid cloud across on-premise and VMware Cloud on AWS as an example?
Yeah, great question. So we do now support the VMC on AWS that is supported for cloud workload protection. So we can do the vulnerability assessment there.
Okay, cool. And long term, I assume we'll support other clouds that that are running VMware technologies.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. As far as roadmap goes, I know that we're continually looking to expand what our vulnerability assessment can cover. We did just release support through our further solution suite. We have a next gen AV and EDR plus audit remediation solution. So that audit remediation solution that we saw before, plus the preventative capabilities. Within that, we now do vulnerability assessment for your standard endpoints too. So it's something that we're continually building out.
Cool. There is a question around this idea of privileges of role-based access and sort of controlling who gets obviously security is a very sensitive area, so it's like what kind of capabilities and controls are there around role-based access and different kinds of roles for different kinds of activities.
Great question. That's something that we are concerned with, and we do see within the Carbon Black Cloud console. We do have quite granular RBAC. You can specify the controls or capabilities that your admins within the Carbon Black Cloud console have to a very specific level. So you can say, hey, they only have view access to this specific page, or they have manage access for this specific capability, say like taking action on endpoint, or they do or do not have the capability to run those queries. So we do have granular role-based access control.
Cool. So I guess in terms of the workload, I think there's a question around sort of like, how much up the stack, is like the OS, and then there's applications running. What's the sort of focus of what Carbon Black is looking at?
Yeah, great question there. With cloud workload protection, we are able to look at both OS-based vulnerabilities and application-based vulnerabilities. So we can look at both of those within the solution. One thing I want to mention as well is that this cloud workload protection solution can be used alongside or on its own with the other Carbon Black Cloud solutions. So you can add on those preventative, the next gen AV capabilities, and it uses the same agent and same console. So there wouldn't be any additional deployment that someone would have to do if they want to add on those additional capabilities.
It's an interesting point you raised around the agent, and is the agent? I assume the agent's running at the host level and sort of has then visibility to sort of everything that's happening on the host. Is that sort of the mechanism, or is it sort of different from that?
We run on the guest OS level. The reason for that is our agent hooks into the kernel, so we can get some of that additional or extended visibility. So we sit at the guest OS level. So in terms of the vSphere environment, you would have an agent deployed to each one of your workloads or virtual machines.
Got it.
And always the classic questions are always around overhead and
yes,
like how much given that you're running at the OS levels, that I assume that's sort of the way you approach it is pretty manageable, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of utilization or overhead, a lot of people who use an AV or vulnerability management solution are used to it taking a lot of the endpoint's resources. We sit very low on the endpoint. So in terms of CPU utilization, for example, we're under 1% on average because we're scanless in terms of both the vulnerability management piece as well as the preventative or next gen AV piece. And again, that's across the solution suite. So if they had, the next gen AV, they have cloud workload protection, we're under 1% CPU on average.
Okay, it's good to know.
Very cool. I think we have just one more question and then we'll wrap it up. So there's a question coming in about Linux subscription. Do we still need that, or does Carbon Black cover it?
We can cover Linux OS as well. Not sure if you have a specific one in mind, but we cover RHEL, CentOS, SUSE, Ubuntu, with the cloud workload protection solution, as well as our other solution suites, including the next gen AV.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you do have any other questions, there is information on our YouTube channel in the description where you can check some additional resources about the solution on our website, and some data sheets as well. So feel free to check those out. That's on VMware Cloud YouTube channel, and you can check it out on our multi-cloud live stream playlist. With that, does anyone any final thoughts from you, David or Kendra? Thank you so much again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Kendra. It was good demo. Thank you so much.
Of course, yeah, it was great meeting you all. And if you do have any questions, please reach out to us at VMware as well. Lauren, not sure if we can share out my contact information or anything like that, but I'd be happy to answer any additional questions offline as well.
Perfect. Yes, we can help you out with that and maybe get it into the chat. So thanks everyone for joining. And as we said, this month is dedicated to security solutions. So on Thursday, we'll have another session focused on multi-cloud security. Thanks again, Kendra. And yeah, hope to catch you all next time.
Thanks. Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.